So we're going to cover an introduction of a function called Cyber Prevent, which is a national function across the UK within law enforcement. So talking about cyber crime as a whole, the National Cybersecurity Centre, the NCSC, they are the technical lead in response to cybercrime. The national law enforcement response is by the NCA. Regional level, then you have groupings of police hubs called ROCUs. I work within the Southwest ROCU, and then obviously you have your local forces across the UK. There's a framework to how cybercrime is tackled by law enforcement. It's called the 4P framework. I'm talking specifically under the prevent strand of that. Megan, as you know, has just spoken under the protect aspect of that. So this might be a very familiar sort of family saying, parental saying, child's upstairs playing on the computer where I know they are safe. A few years back, absolutely right. That was probably parenting 101. They're upstairs out the way. What's the worst that could be happening? Now, though, with the access to all the kind of harms and risks online through all sorts of different devices, that's actually changed how we should perceive that sentence. It's not just, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a second, it's not just about risks that could be incoming. It's about risks that can be generated from our own residents. So a lot of the other topics that you would have seen so far are around cyber safeguarding. I've given that as a top level overview. Terms like e-safety, online safety, digital safety, internet safety, pretty much all in the same to a point, and they cover certain aspects of usage of digital devices and harms with that. Our function there within Cyber Prevent is a niche function which you don't really see too much of anywhere else. So essentially, the cyber safeguarding piece is around illegal content, physical, mental harms, age-restricted contents, bullying, coercion, manipulation, and then criminal elements added into that as well. A huge funnel of risk that can be channeled straight through the mouthpiece, the screen of a device within anyone's hands. Okay, so accessible or achievable through devices. We're not just talking with the cyber prevent side of things. We're not just talking about the harms that can be put onto someone. It's also about the harms that person can put out to other people as well. So it's important to note at this point that there are two categories of cybercrime as sort of dictated by UK government: cyber-enabled and cyber-dependent. So cyber-enabled crime is any kind of traditional crime that can just be enhanced by the use of technology. But cyberbullying has been mentioned throughout this. Okay, so obviously before, let's say the advent of technology, before it's more mainstream, you kind of have to be physically there for bullying to have that impact, or the higher impact at least. Now with everything being connected, okay, now what happens is cyberbullying is now a new term, and that just means that the scalability and impact is much greater in the reach as well. So technology doesn't need to exist. So dependent then, which is a function, which is our sort of core concern, is around use of skills and technologies commonly thought of around like stuff like hacking, creating malware and bits and pieces like this. So quick sort of case study then with the kind of people that we work with, generally speaking. Around about the age of 15, this young person had programmed their own distributed denial of service software. Essentially, they'd created a piece of software which was able to stop something else from working properly: a computer, an application, a network, whatever that was. Going to the age of about 16, it was then commercialized, developed over 110,000 users, generated 1.7 million attacks that was attributable to that piece of DDoS. 16 to 18 committed nearly 600 attacks against over 180 IP addresses. By the time they're 18, was arrested and found with the monies that you see on there. If you move across, then it's sort of a bit of a pathway or a timeline as to what else happened through his ages. So not really interested in school, wasn't really engaging with school enough. And sometimes that gets just looked at as someone that's really disruptive, and just because they want to be disruptive. But actually, a lot of the time it's because they're not really interested. Something doesn't really pique their interest, or they're going to have a hyper focus and it's not within schooling. And if they're not challenged enough, what happens is they're most likely going to try and find their own challenge somewhere else. And when it comes to cybercrime and other bits and pieces, okay, it's an accessible thing which does start to pique people's interests. This person was a gamer. Okay, we'll talk more about that in a second. Start to talk on different kind of gaming forums. That started to escalate into cheating and trolling, then the denial of service and hacking sites, etc. I found some newfound wealth and obviously wanted to keep that going, so started to generate more and more. So the gaming aspects of like hacking and the pathways into hacking and that type of cybercrime and the safeguarding concerns around that, that was initially looked at by a report sponsored by the NCA and Crest. They essentially looked at the gaming world and people who game as being a fairly common pathway into developing those skills and then becoming a cyber criminal. The problem with that one is where there is documented evidence of that being a pathway, the approach was a little bit off. So just because someone games and likes to tweak with the code for certain games, that doesn't make them instantly some form of cyber criminal. And then the Computer Misuse Act 1990, which is a key piece of legislation which is brought in specifically to tackle cybercrime. Prior to that, there was nothing else in place. So the new hackers of the world essentially were having to be trialled under previous long-standing laws, which weren't quite fit for purpose. Going into it then, so computer misuse is a term you'll hear quite a lot connected to the Computer Misuse Act. The problem with this one though is it's essentially a gateway. So by conducting a computer misuse, it gives you the functionality to commit tens of other crime types as well. I believe you've probably already seen this document previously, but the Ofcom Online Nation is starting to talk about the accessibility and the widespread connectivity within populations. Again, so really important to understand the connectivity and the availability is a core concern around, or a consideration at least, when we talk about cyber prevent subjects. UK children aged 3 to 15, 57% play games online. Adults 16 plus, 38% play. UK households, 39% have at least one games console. So again, the availability of the gaming side of things is there. Crime Survey of England and Wales. So computer misuse offences, a 37% increase to around just over 1 million. And this is in the last sort of just over a year reporting. Computer misuse offences against individuals, 42% increase to around 883,000. And then against the population, it's estimated about 1 in 60. The problem with these statistics are that it relies on recorded and documented crime. However, what we know is that cybercrime is a massively underreported crime type. Looking at schools, okay, so this is very important, especially if we've got our own young people or we work with young people and we hold safeguarding concerns, considerations, or responsibilities. So primary school, secondary, further education, higher education. This is taken from the Cybersecurity Breaches Survey, and this just shows you the sort of level of consistent pressure that the school systems are under. And that's from all sorts of different kinds of people, from disgruntled ex-employees, current employees, students, ex-students, people down the road trying some stuff out, all the way through to building up to hostile state actors and organised criminal gangs. So Cyber Choices is the national platform, and that is essentially designed to tackle cybercrime, engage with young people to just hopefully steer them away at the earliest possible point and steer them away from developing those criminal sort of attributes and just point them in directions where you can continue to learn these skills. There's a good career pathway out there for you, and it's early intervention, positive behaviour change is essentially what Cyber Choices is. The people that we work with are specifically going to be those that are technical. They are looking at coding, hacking. They've maybe attempted to gain access to different systems and devices and stuff like this, as long as they haven't crossed sort of like a unwritten threshold, essentially. If they're going through and they are in the middle of being investigated, they're someone that we can't work with. And depending on the level of a crime that is committed, and if it is seen through, we might not be able to work with them again. So it's about getting in there early. Quickly then, so motivations is really important on this. Because this is what we need to tackle. It's not the act. The act itself just gives us a little bit of understanding as to maybe capability, accessibility, and stuff like this, so we can remove the tools, the weapons, and that kind of stuff. So there is a point for that. However, without being able to tackle motivations and understanding the individual, you'll probably never really have as best impact as what you could do. So we talk about the reward. So the reward can be either an internal thing to the individual or an external thing, and massively differs from person to person. And there's a whole host of other ones on the screen at the minute. Most important ones to mention, though, financial gain isn't always actually the primary motivation for hacking, etc. and stuff like this. It's normally around the challenge, the notoriety, the sort of peer influence, and stuff like that, and testing out the skills, and also the lack of awareness that there are laws in place and how we interact with technology. Key thing then, the availability and accessibility. So hardware and software, okay, being the mix. There are off-the-shelf tools. So a few years back, you needed to really be technical, and you had to have certain pieces of software on certain devices in order to really have this effect. Nowadays, you can go online and find devices. A lot of them look like they're games as well, or some sort of gamified objects, which again make it more appealing and more accessible to younger people. And then the impact as well for this. So people that are testing out these skills, obviously they open up risks themselves a much greater extent than in maybe some other people with different crime types. And the reason for that is because they open themselves up for being overly connected and engaging with organised crime groups who put pressure on the young people as well to commit some of these acts for them because they know they're scapegoats. So similar to certain other crime types. But the crime impact is it can vary, can be quite similar at the same time. So the individual that has suffered some form of cyber attack and the person who has been part of the actual cyber attack as well, they might suffer the same kind of feelings, emotional, mental, physical stresses, but for slightly different reasons. So that is something else that we talk about with our young people as well. And those concepts, it's not just that there's a law, there's a set of rules and you've broken them, because hey ho, they know what rules are, they know what boundaries are. Some people struggle with the concept of that, and then that starts to tie into the audience type for us. The majority of the people that we end up having to work with around committing cybercrime aren't inherently bad people. It is purely because they have a hyper focus, they're neurodiverse, either diagnosed or not fully diagnosed, and they may never actually be fully diagnosed. And one of the reasons for that is because it just takes a certain quality or a couple of qualities from that sort of that long list, which will put them in harm's way and increase their risk to other people as well. Hyperfocus is the main one there. Hyperfocus is in the wrong direction. If they have a lack of understanding around boundaries, okay, this is a sort of perfect storm for the people that we work with. Okay, impact then. So the impact of how someone uses their technology ranges from a visit from the police, being expelled from school, all the way through to prison sentence and not being able to get jobs they want, and not being able to travel to certain countries. Cyber choices then is found in a whole host of different places. So when to call the police document, NPCC guidance. Okay, so they talk about drugs, weapons in schools. They also talk about cybercrime. Keeping Children Safe in Education, so KCSIE 2024. Okay, that's in there. Cybercrime is in there. Cyber choices is mentioned in there, and there's also lesson plans, etc., and stuff within PSHE website, and Fearless as well. So the sort of youth part of Crime Stoppers, and there's plenty more places as well coming out as the months go on. The cyber choices resources then aimed, okay, so across the board. So within the prevent world, we were having to work with people as young as 9, sometimes a little bit younger, which sounds crazy, but because everything is connected and people are learning and picking up technology much younger than what myself and some of you in the audience have ever did. Okay, this is one of the reasons why the accessibility and the age range is dropping massively for this crime type. So some misconceptions, only a laptop or desktop computer can be used to hack. That's not true. Mobile devices, some things that just look like almost a nothingness, Raspberry Pis, for example, and everything else. You need to be technical, no, like we mentioned, off the shelf. Using a VPN is a red flag. So no, we talk about using a VPN to protect ourselves online. So just because someone's trying to protect themselves online or hide themselves online isn't necessarily a red flag for this. My child's learning to code, isn't that illegal? Absolutely not. No. My child is upstairs playing on the computer. We talked about one already. You have to go on the dark web to do this, and that alone is illegal. And that's not true either. There's plenty of legitimate entities on the dark web. Okay, so just because someone is using the dark web, a lot of the time when we talk with young people, it's a buzzword, and it's a bit of a show-off factor that they can mention that they've been on the dark web, and actually they don't do anything with it. They just know how to get on it, or they can talk about it, and actually they've never been on it as well. And that's the case with a lot of the people we end up working with. And learning to hack is against the law, which it's not in the UK. Learn to hack is not against the law. However, there is a clear boundary where the Computer Misuse Act comes in. So if you've got safeguarding responsibilities, okay, we have a referral system, and this is a national mechanism, as I mentioned. So whether you are in England, Wales, for example, Scotland, you'll be able to refer someone in if you have concerns around how someone's using technology. Again, we don't expect anyone to be able to make that call as to is it a specific fit for us. You can email your sort of cyber choices team, your local cyber choices team, and ask the question. It's a voluntary system, okay. So if the young person doesn't want to engage with us, then we don't engage. Okay, the issue with that then obviously is if left to their own devices, most likely we're going to end up criminalizing themselves in the future, cause themselves bigger issue than if they took the early option and engaged with us early on. So we have referral forms, okay, which can be filled out, but you don't need to go that far initially as well. You can just reach out for a conversation and we can point you in the right direction. So if it's someone that's not a fit for us, we'll make that decision with you, and we will hopefully be able to signpost you to probably a much better placed organisation or safeguarding mechanism if they're not suitable for us. Referral received, suitability checks, accepted onto cyber choices, and then that's it. We move on to sort of working with them on a one-to-one basis to understand that individual, to work out the motivations, and then be able to come up with a plan to steer those motivations and those actions in a better direction. Resources, okay, so a lot of this is familiar to you as you've already seen a lot of this so far. UK Safer Internet Centre, the NCSC, ChildNet, CEOP, and Cyber Choices. The one thing I will say about the NCSC is if you were to look at Cyber First and look for navigators, cyber navigators, that's an online safety interactive sort of video. So young people between sort of 11 to 14 is what it's aimed at. They can sort of pick their way through, choose options, and then it plays out in front of them about keeping themselves safe online. That's quite a good resource. And that is it from me.